Just Like Us, for LGBT young people.
Hello, Sarah.
Hey, James.
A little ditty for the listeners.
How are you this month, James?
You know that tweet that just says everything keeps happening so much?
Oh, very that.
Very that at the moment.
Feeling it.
But we're vibing. We're vibing and keeping it tight. How are you? You're coming to me live from...
Live from Berlin.
From Berlin.
Yeah. It's our first time the podcast has gone international.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I'm enjoying it.
What are we talking about this month, Sarah?
Well, as the second week of November is Trans Awareness Week, we thought we'd talk a little bit about trans issues, but also we felt like we'd covered that a little bit in the past. So we're going to have a bit of a discussion of what it's like, really, like living under homophobia and transphobia in 2019. And we're going to hear from some JLU ambassadors. So yeah. I think it's going to be a great episode.
You're listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people.
So yeah, like you said, young LGBT people tend to be pretty up to date on stuff like gender isn't binary and this is what pronouns are and stuff like that. But we did want to just kind of have a frank discussion about what it's like in 2019. So quickly before we started, we did just want to talk about like the fact that obviously we are both white, cisgender, gay people. So a lot of our experience is going to be like not universal. I mean, we're also, as we'll talk about, kind of surrounded by people who are very accepting of us. So we kind of wanted to have a discussion with each other. Hopefully there will be some stuff that people can relate to, but obviously what we're talking about is not going to be universal.
Yeah, so that's kind of part of why we're having this discussion. We were talking about how it would be great to talk about how living in a world where homophobia and transphobia are present can be really draining. Obviously, so we've spoken a lot about self-care, I think, in the past, which is really important, but it's also okay and normal, I think, to feel down about just the fact that homophobia and transphobia exist and they kind of suck. And we've made huge strides already, but there is still a long way to go for things to be normalised fully. And I think part of what can be so difficult is that we have made huge strides, so it takes you almost by surprise. Yeah,
I think definitely is. It's easier to get in a bubble on social media. Is notoriously easy to. Obviously, you only follow people who you agree with to a certain extent. So it can feel like the whole world is on your side. And, we can get married now, and it's technically illegal in a lot of places to discriminate based on sexuality or gender. And as well, obviously we tend to be surrounded by circles of people who accept us. I'm not going to hang out with homophobes willingly.
That's only for Christmas.
Next month.
Yay!
So it's very easy to get into, this bubble of assuming everything's fine. And then suddenly you're like, oh...
Yeah. And it's also this much bigger thing that you're part of. You forget, I think, there's dealing with homophobia when it's directed at you, and there's thinking about the concept of homophobia being so much bigger than you that it's difficult to imagine everything being perfect. And I think this sounds like we're being very cynical, but it's not that things aren't wonderful in many ways and a lot better than they were, but it's also just important, I think, to acknowledge those feelings and to kind of think about the fact that it can just be a bit rubbish. It can feel like feeling surrounded by that.
You're listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people.
We're not going to talk about, self-care as a whole, but very briefly, I think that's why it's so great to have LGBT pals, because
definitely
those are the people who more than anyone else probably are going to understand why you might be feeling down about it or might be feeling rubbish. I mean, other people can kind of understand conceptually I'm sure that must be really tough, but without having had that fear, it's difficult to relate entirely.
Yeah, and you have the added emotional effort of you having to explain to a person that's never been through it why it's an issue. So you have to kind of do all the legwork until they can kind of give you some empathy on the topic, which I think can be really difficult.
I know before I had many LGBT friends, I was having to explain to my straight friends while I was still at school. I was and here's why this thing sucks and here's why that thing sucks. And it's when I came to uni and I made gay friends, I didn't have to, I could just, make jokes about it and just have myself understood. But even us talking about this, I mean, like we said, we're not coming from a kind of universal perspective. We're coming from quite a kind of privileged position within the LGBT community.
Definitely.
We get to live our daily lives and assume everybody is okay with us, and then suddenly somebody's like, I'm homophobic, and it's, bad.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of trans people, like, every day they deal with people misgendering them and with,
100%.
I think we don't realize often enough how brave a lot of LGBT people are to just, like, keep existing every day and to just, like...
Yeah. I know what you mean.
It's really impressive.
Because, like I said before, when I had my little anecdote of like when you're walking down the street and someone suddenly like says something, it's kind of, even if it's not directed at you, it's still horrible. But it's like if you are someone who, if you're someone where it's kind of your transness or your LGBT-ness is like visible all the time, it can be even more of like a slog and even more of a difficult situation to go through, I think.
You're listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people.
Keeping it light though, things are good, and LGBT people are often happy.
And our LGBT ambassadors are here as proof of that.
Woo!
In many ways. Yeah, so we thought we would hear from some of them talking about their experiences.
Okay, so here's a little clip from one of our ambassadors, Elly.
Hi, my name is Elly. I use they and them pronouns, and I identify as non-binary transmasculine. One thing I wish that I'd known growing up is that your gender identity is not always as easy to work out as it's often shown on TV. I've not always known that I was trans, and although looking back, it's clear that I've always been non-binary, I've had some real uncertainties about my gender identity. It took me time and exploration to figure myself out. My main advice would be, let yourself explore how you like to present yourself, and try out different pronouns and names with your friends. You don't have to be sure. I'm still now working out who I want to be and how I want to present myself. And this is an ongoing journey for everyone as you become an adult, whether you're transgender or not. My non-binary role models are Jonathan Van Ness, who is a star of Queer Eye and has his own podcast and book, amongst other things that he does. He's fierce, fabulous, and confident, and an excellent example of an openly non-binary person who's really successful. Another role model of mine is Caitlin Benedict, who is one of the hosts of the BBC podcast NB, which I would highly recommend. They are so open in their podcast about their feelings around their gender identity and being non-binary, and their bravery in sharing those feelings has really helped me explore my own feelings and showed me that I wasn't alone in the ways that I was feeling.
And next we have Ramses talking about his experiences.
Hi, I'm Ramses and I use he/him pronouns. When I started thinking about coming out to my friends and family, or starting my transition, I thought I had to tick certain boxes about my appearance. I had to wear male clothes, grow facial hair, have a deep voice, a flat chest. I soon realized I had started obsessing over what I looked like, so I took a step back. This wasn't about me becoming a different person. The goal was for me to be able to be myself at all times. That meant I had to start to learn my flaws and my body and give myself time, and remember I'd always been a man. Sure, a lot of things were going to change, but that didn't mean I have to become a different person. My past experiences and my body were and are still part of me. This made coming out less scary. I didn't have to look the part, I just had to learn to allow myself to take time to think about what kind of man I wanted to be and to embrace that. And this is something more and more families should understand. No matter what relationships we have or how we identify, we're still the same people, with the same hobbies, fears, and need for love as before. Coming out is not about grieving who we were or were expected to be. It's about celebrating our journey of self-discovery. I've been out of the loop lately, but one of the people I always keep close to my heart is Candy Darling. She was an amazing American actress who became famous working with Andy Warhol in the 60s and 70s. She was stunning and sassy and had to overcome a lot in her life. And I also want to give a shout out to all the transgender and non-binary artists, writers, actors, directors who represent our community in the media. That's the kind of content I would have loved growing up.
You're listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people.
So one of our ambassadors, Daniel, had this to say. For trans people in general, a lot of people are going to try and tell you what being a good trans person is, in quotes. It took me a while to understand how being trans can be any way positive. But the most important gift you get is the opportunity to decide what your gender means for you. Don't listen to anyone trying to tell you that you must be blank to be blank, because you need to decide that for yourself. For example, my situation on what being a man is, some men take for granted, but as a trans dude, you have to face up to it and choose your destiny. I think that's really lovely. Thank you, Daniel. That sounded sarcastic, but I meant it.
No, genuine. Here's a little bit from Rhimano and his experiences. Something I wish I had known about being trans earlier is that you don't have to reach any expectations of what you want changing on your body. I used to think that you were only trans if you were uncomfortable enough to have a certain number of things changed through surgery, and this always used to put me off identifying as male, as that felt way too intrusive. Now I'm more educated and have been living as a trans man for nearly 2 years publicly. I understand that this isn't the case, and that some trans people don't even have surgery or hormones. I'll keep this short and sweet. There's no wrong way to transition. It's all about what the individual is comfortable with. That's lovely.
I like that. And I think both of those tied in with our message of like, both of those kind of talked about like how hard this stuff is, but also like there's very much like room for happiness and for like joy.
And yeah, and for feeling like satisfied with your situation. It doesn't mean you're always constantly unhappy.
Yeah. That's it from us this month. I'll see you next month, Sarah.
I'll see you next month, James.
Au revoir.
Bye.
You've been listening to Just Like Us, the monthly show for LGBT young people. The music was by Twisterium. We come into schools too. Young people, teachers and parents can find us at www.justlikeus.org.